I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: why should we be worried about the allegations being made about Judge Kavanaugh? Now, before I get into why I think we should be worried about what we're seeing unfolding in front of us right now over this issue, let me make one very, very important point. If these allegations are true, and he did actually do what he's been accused of doing here, it is not at all acceptable to try and justify his actions by claiming, oh, well, that's just what adolescent boys do and it's not that big a deal. No, that's not an acceptable response at all. But here's why I'm worried about what I'm seeing unfolding around these allegations. There is a large group of people who are in the public square and are on social media and in other places who are acting and speaking as if these allegations are proof that he is guilty. The simple fact that he has been accused of this act is proof enough in their eyes that he is guilty. That is not how natural justice works. And it's a very dangerous society to be living in where simply making an accusation is enough to condemn a person and to say, yep, they're definitely guilty. That's not how this is supposed to work at all. A person is only supposed to be considered guilty if there is a substantive body of evidence, a substantive case that can be made against them, where you look at that case and you say, on the balance of probabilities, and when we look at all the evidence, it's more likely than not that this person is actually guilty of this act. That's the moment at which we should be starting to think, yes, there's guilt here. Now, the legal standard obviously is even higher again. It's got to be, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is an extra safeguard again that's built into it. But that's where the notion of guilt should come into play, not at the point where someone simply makes an accusation. Now, you might be tempted to join in the chorus that inevitably sort of springs up at this point. Oh, well, if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be afraid of treating or approaching things this way. Well, no, that's not how that works at all. I mean, the whole reason that the witch trials happened was because all it took was allegations. No one stopped to actually question the hysteria. No one stopped to question the validity of the claims. It was just enough to make an accusation. Hey, those kids saw Goody Proctor consorting with the devil. That's good enough for me. This is how you end up with a mob, a blind mob that isn't dispensing justice anymore. That's just destroying lives and innocent lives because of this hysterical idea that an allegation is good enough to find a person guilty of wrongdoing. And in this particular scenario, there are some big red flags that should be causing us to say, we need to be really careful about these allegations, because in this case, there is very, very clear and strong political motivation and reasoning why a false allegation could be weaponized and used as a political tool. There's actually reasons for why someone might want to make false allegations that are a lot clearer and starker in this particular scenario involving Judge Kavanaugh. Now, this doesn't even have to be deliberate. I mean, it could be a political weapon, someone making false allegations. It could be just that the person who's making the allegations is mistaken. This is not uncommon. They might be transferring guilt onto Kavanaugh when it wasn't him, it was someone else that did this to them. It could be that they are remembering the events wrong, that Kavanaugh wasn't even present. And they are remembering the events wrong that they have. And the memory can do this. The memory is a very unreliable thing, especially when you add a long period of time to the mix. So it doesn't even have to be malicious. It could just be mistaken identity. It could just be that she is misremembering what actually happened. So we need to be very, very careful about this, especially with such a serious allegation. This is someone who is being accused of something which I think is a serious act if the person is actually guilty of doing this thing. Now, the fact that so many people are simply treating allegations as proof of guilt now means one of two very troubling things. Number one, it indicates that perhaps in this particular area anyway, natural justice is now dead and that we really are living in a mob mentality. We are seeing a resurgence of the sort of Salem witch hunt mentality, where it's just enough to get an angry mob and to make claims about a person, and that's all it takes for them to be judged, and that they are being judged in a public kangaroo court. They're not actually going through a proper due process. There's not a proper natural justice to the way in which they are even being evaluated and the way in which these accusations are even being discerned. Or the other extreme is this. It's not that natural justice is dead, but we're now living at a time in our history where there's a whole lot of people who have bought into this lie that all men are rapists. And so that's why they believe these allegations to be true. Well, of course they're true, because as we know, all men are rapists. So, of course, that's what men do. Either one of those propositions is extremely frightening. What needs to happen here is people need to stop and they need to say, okay, let's put the evidence on the table and let's actually see if we can determine whether there is guilt or innocence here. Let's see if we can determine what actually happened here. We need to stop with the assumption of guilty until proven innocent, because that's not how a rational, healthy and just society functions. And if we're going to keep this up, then sooner or later what we're going to find is that we're going to have destroyed a whole lot of innocent lives. Because what will happen is unvirtuous people will very quickly realize, here's a tool I can use to get vengeance upon someone. People who aren't necessarily unscrupulous, but who are just broken and dysfunctional will use this tool as well. There's lots of reasons why this tool, if we allow it to take hold in our society, will do a lot of destruction. If we're going to get through these issues, there needs to be clear, level-headed thinking and a clear, level-headed application of those important principles of natural justice. And that has to begin with innocent until proven guilty. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon or PayPal. There's a link for both in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.